Hey, so this is Drew in the editing bay again. So this week I tried to keep the politics or of the current day politics out of the discussion, but the modern the current situation right now with a lot of things, it's kind of hard not to. And I mean, it's already pretty out in the open how we feel about a lot of current things. So yeah, I'm not 100% sorry for the opinion stated in this episode. And, if you stick around, I really appreciate the time and, just even the love and effort that you guys are giving us. So, anyway, I hope you guys enjoy the episode. So, as of recently, as you know, the most recent Superman movie came out. And during the press tour for it, there was James Gunn had mentioned there was it's sorry, I had a little bit of a burp in there. But its message was very much one way, although I definitely feel like people could misinterpret the other way, especially the message about with Lex Luthor and the I don't think Baravia was the one that was getting attacked, but it was the I don't want to spoil it too much, but it's a very one of the main bad guys in the movie. If you understand current world day geopolitics and stuff, it almost kind of feels very modern or topical, so to say. And I kind of feel like with just Superman as a character, there has been times with superheroes or just like certain characters as it is, where their ideals end up getting misinterpreted by, people with less than savory, I'll say, ideals.
Yeah.
As to where, I'm trying to find the right way to put it. I think a very good um very good one to start with, or not start with, another good one is a lot of people tend to project like the X-Men onto themselves where they feel like they are the outcasts of society and so they're the freaks of society and weirdos. We're really the whole point, even back in the comics in the 60s, the whole point of the X-Men was civil rights. You got like all these characters that I wouldn't even say racial. I mean, you could it's very much racial civil rights, but you could also say disability civil rights because and I might be misinterpreting too. But you could say that because you have so many of these characters, the mutants, that look different from each other. They don't all look the same, and they just have different abilities. They have different, you know, the trying to say, but yeah, they have different abilities. And even though back in the day it was written for a racial and probably sexual civil rights, gender specific civil rights movement, you could also hazard to say that that's a civil rights movement when it comes to like people with disabilities or such like that. But kind of unfortunately nowadays, or even back 20 years ago, a lot of people thought that, oh, the mutants are just outcasts to society, and there's nothing else down to it. It's like if you actually read the comics, look at the books, watch the TV shows, the message is there. It's like you'd have to be like just looking at the pictures to not understand that type of message that they're trying to put out there.
And I find that interesting because I was actually going to bring up a similar topic about storytelling and art has always been intertwined, at least in some parts, with what is happening in the world. Even if like as you mentioned, sometimes you see something in a story that is very reminiscent of what's going on now. Sometimes that can just be completely coincidental, and sometimes it's just a very common theme that occurs almost everywhere. So similarities are bound to happen. And it should also be stated that stories that do talk about these things, that actually do talk about these things, they've always got crap thrown their way from the very beginning.
Yeah.
This isn't a new phenomenon. But what has changed is, of course, thanks to the internet and how easily misinformation can spread. Whereas now we have bad actors seeing all of that stuff as as profitable to basically complain about politics in their media as well as diversity and inclusion, not so
Mhm.
subtly stating their problematic biases and
Yeah.
making up stuff just to make more drama, as well as tapping into fears and paranoia over uncertain times to create imaginary problems to point at. Also, they can control the narrative.
Yeah.
And and also and some merely just do it for their own amusement and they
Mhm.
just want to watch it all burn.
Sometimes they
So
don't. Sometimes they don't even believe in the stuff that they talk about. Just they just do it for the clicks.
yeah.
From the stuff I've heard, I also say, and I guess because the gloves are kind of off now, is a lot of people that complain about Superman's politics or Superman being political or an immigrant. It's like we're talking about Superman, right? The guy from outer space, the alien, the literal, not from Earth alien. We're not what.
That's what I was thinking too, because it's like when everyone was, honestly, I'm sorry, but James Gunn just bought his ticket to basically destroy his career. I'm
I
sorry. He just by doing that, he just kind of destroyed it for himself.
I mean his
But
his work's always been kind of progressive, pretty progressive. I mean,
true.
I feel like it's just some people have a negative opinion because James Gunn's stories and writing is very on the lighter side,
Hmm.
or you would say comical. Where a lot of people we've had and I've seen this in a discussion that Jenna had at one point, and then I sent that video to Jenna. I think you saw it too. Is we're kind of so used to all these characters being grim, dark, and gritty, and
Yeah.
these comics being, especially these comics from 50, 60, 70 years ago, are lighthearted. Some of them are a lot more lighthearted. The
Mhm.
movie wasn't exactly like, it wasn't Sesame Street, lighthearted, but it's still like it had light moments and dark moments. It took the, I'm trying to say, hey, it knew that it was a comic book movie. It
Hmm.
was not ashamed of it. And I don't, and I think, you know, when James Gunn or like these people said that it was an immigrant story, he meant that in the lightest sense of the but it's quite literally Superman's not us.
Yeah.
Superman isn't a human.
He's an
Superman's not
alien.
from here, but he represents the good of humanity. And that's the thing that can get misinterpreted, is that we had a whole decade's worth of these type of movies where you have Superman, but he's seen as like this God or Jesus allegory.
Hmm.
And like he has all this godlike powers. Oh, if I have all these godlike powers, I'm going to be evil. It's like, no.
Hmm.
Superman's been written as the champion of the oppressed, the
Yep.
champion of the people that are put down by society for being different skin color, different, sexuality, different this and that, or different religions. And a lot of people think, sadly, a subsect of people looked at that Superman. No,
Hmm.
no disrespect to Cavill, because Gunn
Hmm.
respects Cavill. James Gunn. people saw that Superman as just like some white monarch, deity. This is the peak of humanity. And he's white. It's like, no,
Mhm.
it's not that. That's totally misinterpreting the story.
Yeah.
And I liked Man of Steel back in the day, but there were huge problems with that movie, and like the whole thing with Kevin Costner's whole thing of like holding Superman back because like we're harboring an alien, and it's like we're harboring a godlike alien. He has all these godlike powers. We can't let him out there. That they can't. They didn't raise him as a child.
Yeah.
Slight spoilers, but Ma and Pa Kent from this movie, they raised Clark as their own child. They weren't like just harboring some, like, I don't want to say freak, but they weren't harboring a freak. They weren't
Mhm.
like it wasn't like raising Hercules.
Yeah.
It it's
Or
and that's
maybe.
yeah, kind of technically.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
that's the thing though, is like having I'm trying really not to spoil it too much,
Yeah.
but Superman has a whole struggle between his. I mean, it's not like it's a background struggle, but it's also a foreground struggle. I'm trying. He doesn't like explicitly talk about it for an extended period of time. It's just kind of like an
Yeah.
overarching theme
Yeah.
of where he has this revelation about his biological parents, the L's, the House of L,
Mhm.
and at the end of the movie, he realizes that he might be born from Krypton, but
Mhm.
he's still a habitant in a. His parents are the Kents.
Mhm.
Biological parents might be the House of L, but his parents are the Kents, and he looks out for his message might have been one thing, but he's who he chooses to be is what matters.
Yeah.
And I got really frustrated with somebody because like that is exactly what's missing. The point is like, when we've had a decade of grim dark, like I don't want to say just muscular, but grim dark godlike being Superman. It's like that's missing the point of the original Superman. Yes,
Yeah.
DC Comics is gods pretending to be man, and Marvel is man pretending to be God, but it's when Superman is being treated like all he is because he has all these godlike powers, what's stopping him from being evil? That misses the point of Superman.
Mhm.
That that spits in the face of the people that made Superman back in the day.
Yeah.
That's acting like Superman. I'm sorry.
And it's
Mhm.
and
I'm
it's
not
not
trying to
to
be mad at you.
say and it's not to say that people who misinterpret these things are doing it intentionally. Like some people just
Yeah.
like genuinely are not entirely fully understanding what what is actually happening, and they are more than capable of actually looking at it and
Mhm.
looking and actually seeing what happens.
Yeah.
And I should mention that bad takes absolutely happen. I mean, heck, we've made occasional bad takes because
Oh
it
yeah.
happens to everyone. And that just happens because we're not informed enough on a specific topic.
Yeah.
It only ever
Mhm.
becomes a problem when people don't learn from their mistakes and it's used with the intention to distort the conversation of a particular topic for whatever selfish purpose that an individual may have.
Yeah.
Exactly. And,
And
and I
that's
didn't. Sorry, you go
and
ahead.
that and that's just like that's just another thing too, is that these people that like complain about these things just to complain, they're not doing it genuinely. They're not doing it. They
So
just
here's
see the current climate and they want to cash in on it. That's all they're
Yeah.
doing.
yeah, and I don't want to get too into the current climate, but if you're looking at current stories, whatever, not like comic stories, but news stories, like a lot of these like big like talking heads, a lot of that goodwill towards that current climate is kind of turning around. There's something I mean, I don't want to go too far into it, but you can kind of
Yeah.
get into that. But I think, there's also something just about taking a character who's basically intrinsically linked to a story of somebody not from here living here and being basically the model citizen, or basically being somebody for people to look up to, not somebody to fear, somebody to worship. And unfortunately, sometimes we have stuff like that. And when the message is basically in the marketing saying one thing, and then you actually watch the movie, it's not. I think what some people worry about is it being preachy.
Yeah.
It's not even preachy. That's the thing. It's not even preachy. Superman sees people in trouble, he goes and saves them. That is what Superman does.
Yeah.
He doesn't go aura farm while people are going off and dying.
Yeah.
He saves them. And that's the point of Superman. I'm sorry, I get stuck in Superman. But
It's
I mean,
okay.
that's kind of technically misinterpreting a character into your own ideals.
Yeah.
So, and I know you had a subject, John. You wanted to talk about misinterpreting relationships with characters. And I think it's a really good idea.
I think so, because like the thing is that sometimes people will read into characters who no, I get that. I mean, I get that. I understand that people do shipping and all that. I understand that, but it's either it's either a good ship, or a ship that just feels like it's going too far. For
Yeah.
example, the Disney Pixar movie that came out a long time ago called Luca.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody was claiming that the two main characters, but the two main characters, they're like, oh, they're gay, they're gay. It's like, no, they're just good friends. Where have we gone where we can't have good stories of characters who are just good mutual friends?
I think it really goes both ways, and that's a true thing. Is that you have a situation where a fandom will misinterpret these characters that are super close as very good friends, where sometimes in the inverse, like, it's almost blatant. They obviously sometimes they can't kiss in like some of these types of movies, but the way that they're written it's almost blatant to say, oh, they doing? Oh yeah, they are doing. Like, it's kind of a toss up, because you have to, especially in this current climate, you have to be careful of the type of stuff you put out there, because you're gonna entice an angry mom to get angry at you for having these types of characters. But that's a sad thing. It's a sad thing. It really goes both ways though. But you're absolutely right. Is there are stories that can be interpreted as the characters having a romantic like link with each other, but sometimes it quite literally is just, well, they're really just bros. They're like really close friends. It can be like that. So I mean, yeah.
I think.
Yeah, and
oh, sorry.
I was just gonna add another point into the conversation that could contribute to something like that, is that because I feel like part of it is because especially it does especially feel like we're kind of deprived of actually legitimate good representation. So people will just find it anywhere they can, for better or for worse sometimes.
Yeah.
So I think that's just something to take into consideration. Sometimes it's just resonation. Sometimes it's just people wanting to find something that they can resonate with. And actually, this does bring me to a completely different point, but it kind of goes back into it a little bit, is that objectivity in art does exist, as there are standards in crafting a well-rounded story. After all, if there was no objectivity, what's the point of criticism?
Yeah.
Feedback is how we learn and improve our skills. It's just what's actually happening is the spread of misinformation and bad faith interpretations, not someone simply sharing a fun little observation they made, like an underlying subtext, like a queer subtext, or
Mhm.
someone simply sharing their thoughts, like how a piece of media personally resonated with their personal life. And they aren't trying to persuade anyone to think like them. And you
Mhm.
can absolutely do that while acknowledging the objective truth about what
Yeah.
really happened in the story.
Yeah.
It's not mutually exclusive. And while obviously there have always been cases of people misinterpreting media, even before the internet and social media, like I said, they have undoubtedly exacerbated the issue because
Yeah.
it's now considered money making strategy to remove information.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I was gonna say there was a slight pedal back because this is totally something on board of what you mentioned, Jenna, about kind of misinterpreting, but kind of in your own, like, so to say, headcanon. Um, what when I watched going back to when I watched Superman, there was a scene with Clark and Pa Kent. There's scene, like, in his dialogue, there was something going on with Pa Kent. I can't go too deep into it, but it just kind of gave me that kind of feeling of, like, you know, Superman slash Clark kind of reflects on his father, his dad, I'll say. Reflects onto his dad and sees kind of the fragility of humanity. And,
Mhm.
he has basically all these gifts because of him not being a natural born human, or not, born on Earth. That he
Mhm.
has these gifts to protect people that are much like Pa Kent. Um, that's where I kind of had, like, that kind of moment of, like, oh my god, I love this movie. Like, kind of going
Mhm.
back to interpreting characters, and we've had this conversation months ago, with autistic representation,
Mhm.
is that sometimes, plenty of times, it is quite literally some people just are written with quirks, and you know a lot of times, like, fandoms or people will be like, oh, they're so autism coded, when sometimes it's just
They just have quirks.
character. Yeah, they just have weird quirks,
And
but yeah.
this goes back into my point. It's like some people just personally project themselves onto that character because they resonate with them, and that's
Yeah.
Yeah.
fine. It's like that's fine,
I I
there's nothing
I
wrong with that.
I do think sometimes it's pretty bad when you get, like, somebody who projects themselves onto, like, a serial killer, like a,
Yeah,
I don't know, Jeffrey
like I
Dahmer.
said, it depends on the context,
Yeah,
depends
or
on the intention.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's, like, kind of unnerving when you have people who, like, make a fandom around psychotic behavior, or, like, quite literally serial killer like behavior, or terrible people.
Mhm.
And
Yeah,
it's, unfortunately, it's a common thing nowadays.
and
It's like these characters are written to be irredeemable jerks, or, like, irredeemable monsters, and you have people that fandom over, like, people like Thanos, who wanted to commit genocide, universal scale genocide, and people are like, oh, maybe Thanos was right. It's like, no, there's other
gosh, this is
ways to do it.
gosh, that reminds me of the Attack on Titan scenario, but
Yes.
gosh. But I think that, well, first off, I feel like that whole entire fandom situation is for another conversation because it leads into a much bigger issue that I really want to get into in a different episode.
But it touches
But
upon, like, that, yeah.
yeah, but secondly, this actually brings up to another point. I feel like the art of creating characters and scenarios you're supposed to hate is becoming lost.
Yeah.
I understand about
Yeah.
wanting to be more inclusive and diversify your perspective to be more accessible to everyone. And no doubt that is a good thing, and we should continue to strive for that. But I feel we are in the process missing nuance, subtlety, and media literacy. For example, if a character is intentionally written to be mean, cruel, and narrow minded towards people, especially towards people who might have physical or mental aids or are of a different race, ethnicity, sexuality, gender, etc., then that's the point. In these circumstances, you're supposed to hate that character when they say or do bad
Yeah.
things, and that feeds back into the nastiness of the character, especially when they get explicitly called out by other characters in the story itself for this very thing. This is something completely different from a legitimately poorly written character. So,
Exactly.
like I said, so context in this scenario is important. It's very important. And something else that is always that is bothering me is some people are using poorly written like a word without understanding the definition of it. And predictably, because of that, these two very different concepts are becoming blurred by people who don't take the time to look into it, or by some who are more concerned about creating an eye catching headline than giving accurate information.
Exactly. And I think media literacy is like a big issue with that. That is like when people don't understand that when the message or the character is basically in your face about being, hey, just don't be a jerk.
Mhm.
See all these messages about like these people that go and do all these very bad things are very bad people, and you should not be like them. Like they have to have it spoon fed to them at that point. Like they have to have it like said into their face at that point, because you're gonna have characters or people that see character, like say the people that are fans of Batman, but they're fans of Batman because he's dark and brooding. It's like you gotta understand why Batman is dark and brooding, because he's holding all his pain inside his heart and all this kind of stuff because of everything that happened to his parents and all the losses he has experienced in his life. He didn't just come out of nowhere like this. He was a child, a very privileged child, and he had all these privileges, and then like the people that loved him were taken away from him, and that changed him fundamentally as a person.
Yep.
And people misunderstand that, oh, Batman would be this, Batman would be that. It's like, do you see or read or consume any media that Batman is in? Batman would not be a jerk. Batman would not be some kind of small-minded person on like certain subject X. He
Yeah.
has, especially if people would say it's like, I really don't want to get into like presidential politics, but we have talked about like we kind of have danced around people using the word, like certain words to say things. But I like, when people say certain character would vote this way or that way, it's like if you actually read the characters,
Mhm.
a lot of them are a lot more left centric. Like
Mhm.
certain ones are like center when it comes to certain topics or certain things. Like you can read into like a lot more stories. I would say Iron Man is more of like a center type character or stuff, because I mean, look at him, billionaire, philanthropist, whatever. He can throw his money both ways, just like a Disney. Um, but it's just like, you know that's the problem, is that we have too many characters that people don't seem to have the media literacy to understand that this character is specifically meant to be written as like a member of an oppressed like social group, or they're written as somebody who has all these issues, and or it's a very bad thing to support this type of character because there's such a bad character as a morally bad, not like bad written.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
And
had another thought, but I'll let you go.
but yeah, as you were kind of going into that, I was just thinking like, see, we're reading into it too much. I think we're giving them a bit too much credit. It's like, yeah. And something else I should mention, as like a sort of recent, but not really. This was like, I don't know, 2, 3 years ago. That
Mhm.
is like currently dying out and all that, is that there were definitely cases where media themselves purposefully create content just to make people mad, because that was the current
Yep.
trend. That was the current trend that was going on. Everybody was mad, so they made content to make other people mad. That was just the trend. By inserting all kinds of one-sided political nonsense and adding shallow diversity to already existing franchises, all to stir up conflicts on social media while simultaneously becoming another soulless cash grab. Social media
Yeah.
drama just became another of the studio's moneymakers to boost viewership.
Yeah.
They just simply adapted to another potential marketing strategy. But at the same time, while this phenomenon does exist and is currently rapidly dying at this point, where studios are desperately trying to squeeze every last dollar out of it before that bubble bursts, it should be noted that, as we stated previously a lot of times, sometimes it really is just certain people making up stuff about a show or a movie, or seeing something that can be used as fuel for the fire, regardless of context, just to stir up drama, or wanting to complain about diversity and inclusivity in a production of a movie or show that literally did nothing to piss people off, or literally something that has always been there from the beginning, like with Superman, but now people are complaining about it. All they do is create drama out of thin air for attention and easy cash, because unfortunately, with the current situation, that behavior was and still is enabled and encouraged, and it will certainly not go away quickly.
Yeah, and it's, kind of going back to like certain characters just kind of made to kind of tick people off is, here's another thing. When it comes to like flamboyant characters in
Hmm.
movies, we've kind of delved off like the original subject, but I want to just like point it out. Sorry. We have so many characters. People are so mad about characters that are base level of like flamboyant.
Hmm.
Like certain things, if they dress like a little bit differently. I mean, Ironheart, yes, we had somebody who was absolutely a queen on the runway, if you know what I mean. Yeah, you should check her
Hmm.
out. You should check her out. But
Who that
I
was?
don't know. I don't know if the actor uses
Was
those.
that was that was
Promotes.
that was that Miss Shea Coulee?
Maybe
I think it was Miss Shea Coulee.
I love that actor's energy. I'm just saying. But
Uh-huh.
anyway, people are so mad about characters being flamboyant and all this stuff in movies. They did this crap 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago. And people
Nobody gave
just,
a.
yeah, nobody gave a crap about it because, like, you didn't have, like, incels or, like, grifters yelling online saying it's a bad thing. You just had like some like really flamboyant dude show up in a movie, and sometimes that was just funny because they wanted it to be funny, not
Yeah.
because they're trying to push it down. But of course there are times that like a studio doesn't understand that what made that context funny or what made that type of content funny. So a studio will misinterpret that and then make it more aggressive, more like when you get like some people online, like when by some people were like, "Oh, get out of the way, straight boy," all that kind of stuff, or sometimes they're just doing that to be like craps and giggles, shits and giggles. It's like it's they're doing it for their own like joke, but you get people that don't understand sometimes it's just being ironic, just being funny like poke fun at like some of these people that get so mad over like all this crap.
Another thing that
It doesn't matter.
is a problem of another thing to add to this subject is not only of missing the point of when they want to try to capture lightning in a bottle twice. It's not going to happen twice.
Yeah.
This whole thing about them wanting to do like, oh well, several years ago, we had we had the Harry Potter series, but now we want to just redo it again.
Yeah.
And the thing is that my question would be like, if you didn't like the interpretation of the movies, why didn't you just do it as a show in the first place? Well,
Yeah.
now the reason they want to do it as a show is because, oh well, the everybody claims that Game of Thrones was the first series to ever do this TV show book adaptation thing. They weren't the
No.
first ones.
No,
They were not the first ones.
They did the TV movies of frickin' Narnia back in like the 80s.
Exactly. Like I always had wondered when I was younger, when I watched those Narnia movies by the BBC, why they were so long, is because they were meant to be a mini series.
Exactly.
So everybody claims that they act like this is the first time that everybody's done this, and it's not true.
But this is mostly because Game of Thrones is popular, so we need to talk about the popular thing, and we need to hype up the popular thing. Yay!
It's really funny when some of the movies are poking fun at corporate greed, and all these studios end up making like remake after remake of said thing, and that makes fun of corporate greed. So like the message is instantly lost upon like the people that are making it just because they see marketable character. Ooh.
Yeah, but I find it really funny how whenever they attempt to adapt a story that actually calls out corporate greed, they end up just doubling down on what made them so hateable. Like, for example, the way that Illumination just absolutely butchered the Lorax. I know I'm probably gonna get
100%.
Yeah, they
100%.
absolutely like they turned it into a generic animated go against the corporations attacking nature thing. It's like, dude, if you actually look at the original Dr. Seuss Lorax story, it is actually more bleak and more realistic.
Yeah.
These are corporations that don't care. They do not care about their actions. All they care about is their bottom line. It is like a direct call out to these corporations. Yeah. And Illumination didn't like that. I guess it didn't like to be called out.
Well, here's the other thing too, is that in the original story, the original movie, the Onceler is just a faceless organization, a faceless corporation. And the movie kind of gives the Onceler a backstory. Yeah, they gave him a face, and they not only gave the Onceler a face, but they gave a face to a secondary faced organization where it's like the whole point of the original story is being against deforestation and all this kind of stuff. And all these faceless organizations are hurting the environment. That was the point of the original story. And when you give a face to a singular entity,
you humanize it.
You humanize it. You take away that
and you're not supposed to humanize. And you're not supposed to humanize corporations because they know exactly what they're doing. They know exactly the harm they're doing. They just don't care. They just only see it as a necessary evil, and so they can make more money, essentially.
Yeah, exactly.
I didn't mean to get overly angry. I was just
I'm
sorry about that.
Yeah, but
no, I don't blame you. I think the thing about the whole thing about this corporate, the whole corporate entity as a factor now has gotten so much worse than it was a few years ago, because now pretty soon, and I've talked to my other friends about this, about like these big corporate jobs and corporate entities, is pretty soon they're going to have to make a choice. either treat their employees and their creators and their filmmakers and all these other people, treat them like human beings, or choose AI. Because there's
Yeah.
going to be pretty soon where they're going to have to make a choice.
Well, some of these jobs and all these type of things or whatever, I think they're it on a level there could be a balance, but I think definitely, you know, you lose the human element. And I think it's kind of the sad thing is that, you make all these movies with all these warnings of losing connectivity with the outside world and all this kind of stuff. People end up going to all this artificial tech to, fill things. And that's another thing is that these big corporations are also the people missing the point on things, and
Yeah.
they don't see that, like, hey, replacing all your workers with this or that, it's actually kind of bad because you lose a touch of. I know for manufacturing, to a certain extent, there is like safety. You could do it for safety reasons, or with a certain. I'm trying to think the right word. There are levels to it, but we can't get rid of the arts. We shouldn't be applying all this to the arts, in my opinion. Even if it's
Yeah.
Yeah.
to save a couple bucks, it should not
Yeah.
be applied solely to something that is meant for leisure and not,
Yeah.
sorry. Yeah.
And that's just and that's like I said, this is just corporations see current corporations studios, they see current trend and they want to hop on that trend so they can make extra bucks until inevitably they run themselves into the ground, and that's it. It's like that's all they ever care about.
Well, the
They
problem is, and the problem with people wanting to go and run after trends is trends don't last long.
that's the problem. They
Yeah.
don't.
Yeah, look at the I mean, there's and
Mhm.
I'm sorry, I know I've probably talked about this show once or twice as like what I was from this, but there's an episode of Ed, Edd n Eddy that basically encapsulates this trend. If you take
Mhm.
the Eds as the corporate entity that sees the children of the cul-de-sac do all these new fads or whatever,
Mhm.
the Eds try to bank off of all the things that the kids are doing, but they're always just like a little bit late. And then
Yeah.
they keep trying, and then they make up this whole new fad that people didn't even like, they didn't understand, and they just got frustrated and walked away. And
Mhm.
when they came out from doing that fad, everybody was following their fad that they just did. So they
Yeah.
ran back to try to follow that trend again. And what happened? The trend's already done. So
Yeah.
so it's a perfect encapsulation of following trends, following fads, is that sometimes it's fleeting.
Yeah.
Even though the sequence, it's a sequence because all those
Mhm.
episodes were only like 11 minutes long. It really shows it. It was only
Yeah.
11 minutes, but it like perfectly encapsulated that type of behavior of like a corporate entity trying to follow a trend, make their own trend, see that trend blow up when they're not doing it, and then when they try to do it again, like you said, lightning in a bottle, the people do it. When they're not
Mhm.
doing it, it fails.
Yeah.
So it's funny you mention that, and like
Mhm.
I know I shouldn't really like go into hyperfixations, but I think that actually really encapsulates that type of thing is, and I think some corporations don't understand what makes these trends popular.
And they don't understand. They also don't understand what makes the story special either.
Exactly. And that and
Yeah.
that that
So
goes into the trend too.
And
yeah.
that also gets into how they like I said, this was mostly like 2, 3 years ago. They just do reference humor when they did reference
Mm-hmm.
humor. I think it was ever since Rick and Morty started doing that when that became popular.
Well,
Well, I somewhere I don't know, but
they've been doing reference humor for decades, but I think definitely cynical reference humor. And I love the movies. I love the Deadpool movies as like the character having the character, but
Mm-hmm.
the having the character, then people didn't understand what about the character being cynical and um poking fun at these things is basically literally poking fun at intricacies or like tiny poking fun at these issues within the studio, within the movie. And it kind of harkens back to misinterpreting a character for your own politics. Is you see a lot of Deadpool merch, or I've seen a couple old Deadpool merch that's
yeah,
just basically it's like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, I'm sorry, did I offend you? Or like all this kind of stuff. It's like so corny. I'll say corny. It's so like dumb. Oh, I kind of like, haha, I'm funnier than you. Racial slur type of not racial slur, but you know what I mean. Funnier than
Yeah.
you. I'll go say a slur or whatever type of humor. It's like it's not funny. It misses the point of the
yeah,
character, and
Yeah.
it is frustrating to see um with your point of reference humor is when it doesn't understand why the reference humor works. Sometimes it's just empty and vapid references.
yeah.
Look at
And
Mad
sometimes
Magazine. Oh,
and sometimes it's just
Mhm.
it almost seems like they're just doing it like, and sometimes they just do it like cynically, almost like you
yeah,
hate your job.
yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
look at a good one. I would say is even look at Mad TV or like the Mad TV show from like Cartoon Network from like a decade or two ago. Not a
Oh,
decade or
geez,
two,
I remember that. Oh my
15
gosh.
years ago. I think when you
Mhm.
actually look at it, there were times where you could tell, or even Robot Chicken, because Robot Chicken does it all the time. Um, there's ones you could tell where there was good reasons to give it crap, or there was a good like a solid, you know, effort to try to give it crap instead of just like, oh, we need to give crap to something. Well, let's just do it like this. Oh, I can't talk. And well, kind of going back to following trends.
Mhm.
I'm sorry for bringing it up one more time.
Yep.
Look at all of the 80s cartoons that had a very environmental message.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
some of these cheap knockoff cartoons. Or shit, look at freaking like all these Scooby Doo clones from the 60s and 70s. The
Mm-hmm.
Flintstones, all those cartoons. We haven't just been doing this the past 10 years. We've been doing this crap for decades.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Yeah.
we they see what sells. And crap, sometimes like the studios will do it themselves. They'll make a movie that copies the popular thing, or they'll make a TV show that copies the popular thing, and they completely misinterpret what made the thing popular because they had somebody else that didn't understand the story write it. That's why
Yeah.
when
Yeah.
you get that's why when you get a story, a black story written by
Mhm.
a black creator, when that's a very good story, the studio will try to remake that lightning in the bottle, but they don't get the black creator. They get a white guy. And the white guy doesn't understand the intricacies of what made this black story work.
And
So it
that's the
kind of
thing.
makes it empty and vapid.
If you have someone who understands the situation of what kind of character you want to write, and you
Yes.
ask the person who would understand the situation and the culture and the whole history of it all, it works. When you have someone of indigenous people to write an indigenous story, it will work. It will work because they are from that culture. They are from that part of the world and they understand what they want to tell in that story. Whereas if you have a bunch of white guys try to write like an indigenous story, it's not going to work because they don't understand the culture.
Yeah, they're
Or they
like
don't even talk to people within that culture.
Exactly.
they just use representations that they had consumed when they were younger. So you're just gonna get like they'll understand like why indigenous characters wear headdresses or why they do ceremonial dances. You'll just get like them doing nonsensical stuff. But
Yeah.
that's why like some of these interpretations of I haven't watched Echo in a while, but I did like how they interpreted Native American culture. Is like
Mhm.
it's not always like, especially modern Native American culture. That is a good reflection of modern Native American culture,
Yeah.
and we see, and when you're surrounded by you know those type of people more often. I'll kind of backtrack a little bit. There is sometimes you can get a white guy to come in, but he has to understand either through you know growing up around it or
Or
being
just
near
being
it.
open minded.
Yeah, being
Mhm.
open minded too. They need to read the room basically.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And just thinking about all of our conversations,
Oh,
I can just about all this, oh, the situation has always been there. It could honestly be this, all those things could be summarized as this stuff has always been there, and then the internet made it worse.
yeah.
Yep. That
But
should be
I
our.
mean, quite literally. I think as much as I like what the internet has done for creation, what's done for connectivity, there's also times it's definitely for like media, especially
Yeah.
media that's been around before all this. It's hurt it.
Yeah. And speaking of internet and social media, this was another point that I wanted to bring up a while back, but I didn't know where to put it. So here's a non segue for you. Uh, Another thing to consider about about like when it comes to quote unquote rage bait material is that the majority of people who watch the kinds of media, let's just say they're not unhealthily obsessed with social media and they decided to watch it because of out of curiosity because they were
Mhm.
interested in it. Like that tends to be the majority of the situation. That tends to be the majority of the time when
Well,
stuff like
Mhm.
that happens. And sometimes it's not even people who want to who want to cause drama. It's more so people just getting irrational. Like, well, I'm and
irrationally
when it,
angry.
well, I was more kind of going back a little bit because I needed to clarify. And when it comes to social media drama, it's not even from people wanting to cause drama. It's more so people getting irrationally defensive over
Mhm.
people online having a different perspective than them. The
Yeah.
Yeah.
people who want to cause drama and reviews about movies and shows and stuff that flat out get stuff wrong about it only just
Mhm.
make that conversation worse. However, I feel like the whole getting irrationally defensive part, I feel like this is an entirely different subject for its own episode since I feel it's
You
part
could
of a
say,
larger issue
Mhm.
about children and
yeah,
adults being shoved into one place with nowhere
yeah,
else to go and everybody becomes miserable.
yeah. You could
Mhm.
definitely say that about a lot of stuff. So,
But but actually since we were going on about like internet stuff, that could probably be another episode. Like another episode entirely just talking about the internet.
Yeah.
yeah, actually, that's a good topic, especially exposing young children to the internet when they should be given like a specific time or a specific age cap or something,
Yeah.
so to say.
Mhm.
So I think we're good with recording. Um,
Yeah.
I actually have a booth in town. I have to
Oh,
go
wow.
help run, so I actually have to go.
Oh,